The handcuffs snapped shut in the middle of the hotel lobby. Every head turned. A crystal chandelier the size of a small car threw amber light across the marble floor of the Worthington Grand in downtown Atlanta. And in that light, Officer Darren Hewitt stood with his chest puffed out and both hands locked around the wrists of a black woman in a tailored burgundy blazer. She hadn't moved. She hadn't raised her voice. She had been standing at the concierge desk asking whether her room key had been reset. That was all. Hewitt had been working his off-duty security detail at the Worthington for 14 months. He had a particular way of reading the lobby, a shorthand, a checklist he ran without consciously knowing he was running. It out of place was the word he would have used. He had a feeling for it. This woman had set off that feeling. She was standing near the side corridor. She was on her phone. She was wearing a blazer that cost more than his monthly car payment, and she had no visible luggage. She was black. He did not say it that way, even in his own head. He said, "Something's off." He moved. He didn't ask a question. He gave a command. "Ma'am, hands where I can see them." Dr. Vivienne Calder, which was the name she used when she was not in uniform, and which she had been using for the past 24 hours since landing in Atlanta for the symposium, turned to face the officer slowly. She was 51 years old. She had the posture of someone who had stood in rooms where the stakes were considerably higher than this lobby, and the expression of someone who had been through a version of this before and was measuring, with professional precision, how far it was going to go. "Good afternoon," she said. "Is there a problem?" Hewitt stepped forward, planting himself between her and the elevator bank. "We've had reports of a woman matching your description behaving suspiciously on this floor. I need to verify you're a registered guest." "Of course," she said. "My confirmation number is—" Put the phone away. She looked at him. Not with fear, not with anger, with the flat, evaluative attention of someone deciding how much to explain and to whom. "I'm reaching for my room key," she said. "I said put the phone away and show me your ID." Several hotel guests had stopped. A family near the luggage cart stood frozen. A young couple by the elevator had pressed themselves against the wall, faces caught between wanting to leave and not. Wanting to appear to flee, Marcus at the concierge desk had put down his tablet. Vivienne set her phone face down on the concierge desk. She reached into her blazer pocket. Her fingers found the lanyard inside. She did not pull it out. "Officer," she said, her voice precise and unhurried, "I want to be very clear about what I'm reaching for before I remove it from my pocket." Hewitt didn't register the weight behind that sentence. He heard resistance. "Stop stalling. Hands behind your back." He moved before she could respond, spinning her toward the desk with a grip on her left forearm, bringing her right wrist behind her and securing the first cuff before she had fully processed the motion. The second cuff followed in under 3 seconds. The sound of them locking, two sharp metallic clicks, carried across the marble floor of the Worthington Grand with the clarity of something irreversible. Absolute silence fell over the lobby. A woman near the restaurant entrance made a short, involuntary sound, not quite a gasp, more the noise of witnessing something that cannot be unwatched. Vivienne Calder stood with her wrists cuffed behind her back in the middle of one of Atlanta's most prestigious hotels. She did not struggle. She did not cry. She tilted her chin forward by a fraction of an inch, the way a person lowers their head against a cold wind they cannot stop. And she waited. Officer Darren Hewitt had no idea what he had just done. Hewitt had been with the Atlanta Police Department for 14 years. And the truest thing anyone could say about his career was that it had not gone the way he'd planned. He had applied for the detective track twice. Both times he'd been passed over. The first time he'd been told it was a numbers issue, too many qualified applicants. The second time his supervisor had said, carefully, that there were concerns about his approach under pressure. Hewitt had decided this was politics. His colleagues had not contradicted him to his face, which he interpreted as agreement. He had 4 complaints on file. Excessive force, twice. Unlawful detention, once. Racial profiling, once. All 4 had been cleared through the union's grievance process before reaching a formal disciplinary hearing. He thought of this as the system working. His supervisor at the time had thought of it as a postponement. The Worthington side gig had started as a way to cover his mortgage after his divorce. He had liked it enough to renew the contract every year. He liked the marble floors. He liked that the guests here, by and large, did not argue with him the way people argued with him in the neighborhoods he worked his actual shifts in. He liked that Gerald Holt, the property manager, trusted him completely and never questioned his methods. He guided Vivienne toward the small alcove near the service entrance, away from the lobby, away from the witnesses, and positioned himself between her and the exit. "I'm going to need your full name and your room number," he said. Vivienne Calder. Room 1104. "I checked in yesterday under the Joint Defense Symposium conference block." He wrote nothing down. "What were you doing near the service corridor?" "Making a phone call. I stepped away from the main floor for quiet." "Who were you calling?" "The colleague." "Name of the colleague." She looked at him. "Why is that relevant?" "Because I'm establishing whether you have a legitimate reason to be here." "I'm a registered guest," she said. "The concierge can confirm it. The front desk can confirm it. My room key can confirm it. You said you were reaching for something in your pocket." "A credential." "What kind of credential?" She held his gaze. "The kind that will make this significantly harder for you if you continue." Hewitt produced a short laugh, the specific laugh of a man who uses contempt as insulation. "You threatening me?" "No," she said, "I'm informing you." Inside her blazer pocket, against the silk lining, was a laminated card on an olive green lanyard. The card was federal issue. The emblem in the upper left corner was not decorative. The rank designation below her photograph was 2 words long. She had not shown it. She had spent 2 decades learning when to show it. Showing it too early produced 2 outcomes: stunned overcompensation that felt hollow and resolved nothing structurally, or flat denial, followed by doubled escalation. She had found that giving someone the chance to stop on their own was always worth the brief additional discomfort. Hewitt was not stopping. "Here is how this resolves," he said. "You give me a legitimate reason to believe you belong here, or I call it in and you go downtown. Simple choice." "I would like to make a phone call," she said. "You can make a call from the station." "I'd prefer to make it now," she said. "One call. It will take less than a minute, and this entire situation will resolve itself without any further difficulty for either of us." Hewitt studied her. The offer was specific and calm, and it had the quality of something stated by a person who knew exactly what the outcome would be. It should have given him pause. It irritated him instead. "You think one phone call fixes a suspicious behavior? Stop." "Yes," she said. He stared at her for a long moment. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He stepped back half a foot, jaw tight, watching how he didn't know about the lanyard. He didn't know that the conference she was attending had been coordinated directly with the office of the AR. "My deputy chief of staff." He didn't know that the phone call she had been making, before he'd told her to put the phone down, had been to a general officer whose direct line was listed under emergency contacts at Fort McPherson. The lamp in the alcove threw a narrow column of light. In it, Vivienne Calder stood with her hands cuffed behind her back, perfectly still, and waited for the man in front of her to finish making his mistake. The lobby had not returned to normal. Marcus, the concierge, had quietly moved to the management corridor the moment the cuffs went on. He had not run. That would have been unprofessional, but he had walked with the urgent, controlled pace of someone carrying important information to the person who needed to act on it. Patricia Reese, the duty manager, was at the front desk review station when he found her. She had been on shift for 4 hours. She had handled a billing dispute, a noise complaint from the 14th floor, and a room block issue for a wedding party. She was not prepared for what Marcus described. She came out to the lobby in under 90 seconds. The alcove was visible from the main floor. Reese took in Vivienne's bound wrists, Hewitt's posture, the silence of the lobby, and the phones that several guests had not quite lowered. She walked directly to Hewitt. "Officer, what's the nature of this stop?" "Police business," Hewitt said, not looking at her. "Step back." "This woman is a registered guest," Reese said. Her voice was controlled. There was iron in it. "I have her check-in record." She was acting suspiciously near the service corridor. "She was using the concierge desk," Reese said. "Marcus seated her at the concierge station when she reported a keycard malfunction. That's a standard service interaction." "Ma'am, I need you to step back. I need you to explain to me why a guest is in handcuffs in my lobby." Vivienne turned her head slightly. She made eye contact with Reese and gave a small nod. "Steady. Handle it carefully." Reese took one measured step back. She kept her phone in her hand. This was the first problem Hewitt had not anticipated. The hotel was not going to stand behind him. The second problem came through the revolving doors 2 minutes later. Colonel James Okafor, retired Army, now civilian director of the Joint Defense Symposium's organizing committee, had been on his way back from a breakfast meeting 3 blocks over. He was carrying 2 coffees, one for himself and one for Vivienne, and he was reading a message on his phone when the lobby stopped him. He had spent 30 years as an Army intelligence officer. He could read a room in under 2 seconds. He put both coffees on the nearest flat surface. "Vivienne." James, her voice was even. He looked at the handcuffs. He looked at Hewitt. He looked back at Vivienne with a look that asked, "How far do you want me to go?" She gave the faintest shake of her head. "Not yet." Okafor turned to Hewitt. "What is the legal basis of this detention?" "Sir, I need you to step back." "I've heard that. I'm asking for the legal basis. Reasonable suspicion of what specific crime?" She was acting in a manner consistent with, "That's not a crime," Okafor said. "I'm asking what specific crime you are investigating." Hewitt turned to face him fully now. He had a type for this kind of bystander, the well-dressed man in his 60s invoking authority he didn't have, expecting deference that wasn't coming. "Sir, if you don't step back, I will include you in this. Detention. Make a note of that," Okafor said, looking at the nearest visible phone camera, a guest at a table near the restaurant who had been recording for the past 3 minutes. For the record, Hewitt's neck went red. "You're interfering with a lawful police action." "You haven't established a lawful police action," Okafor said calmly. "Ms. Reese, can you confirm this guest's reservation and check-in time?" "Room 1104. Checked in at 6:17 yesterday eve. Ning under the Joint Defense Symposium conference block." "Thank you," Okafor said. "So her presence here is documented by the hotel from yesterday evening. Your stated concern was suspicious behavior on this floor." "Which floor?" "This floor," Hewitt said. "The lobby floor, where she's a registered guest, who has been confirmed by the concierge and the duty manager." Okafor looked at Hewitt. "Remove the handcuffs." "I don't take orders from—" "Then take it from me." The voice came from behind Hewitt. He turned. Sergeant Wayne Calloway was standing at the entrance to the lobby alcove in his APD shirt, arms at his sides, with an expression that Hewitt had never seen on the sergeant's face in 14 years. Calloway had been in the hotel's second-floor conference room attending a community liaison meeting. He had come downstairs to get water and walked into the lobby just as the camera phones went up. He looked at the handcuffed woman. He looked at Hewitt. "What are we doing here?" Calloway said. His voice was very quiet. "Sarge, she was acting." "What are we doing here, Hewitt?" It was not a question the second time. Hewitt's jaw tightened. "Suspicious behavior near the service corridor. Non-compliance with a lawful request for identification." Calloway looked at Reese. "She's a registered guest?" "Confirmed," Reese said. "How long has she been in custody?" Hewitt looked at his watch. 18 minutes. Calloway said nothing for several seconds. He was doing a calculation that had nothing to do with time. "Get the key," Calloway said. "Sarge, get the key." Hewitt reached for the cuff key with hands that were, for the first time, slightly unsteady. He had expected this to be over already. He had expected the woman to produce a hotel confirmation on her phone and be embarrassed and shuffling toward the elevator, grateful to be free. That was how it had gone every other time. The calm ones cracked fastest. In his experience, they didn't want the scene. They didn't want the trouble. This one had not cracked. She had been waiting. The recording phones were the thing that changed the texture of the room. There were 4 of them, visible by the time Calloway arrived. One was Marcus at the concierge desk, who had set his tablet down and was now holding his personal phone with the quiet deliberateness of someone who has decided. That documentation is the only thing he can offer. One was a woman at a table near the hotel restaurant, who had been watching since the handcuffs went on. One was a teenager near the elevator bank, who had pulled the phone out with the reflexive instinct of a generation that documents everything. And one was a man near the main entrance who had simply not looked away. Hewitt was aware of the phones. He had always been aware when he was being watched. He had performed for audiences before. The squared chest, the controlled voice, the clean narrative of an officer exercising authority. He had always been able to look back at the people watching and know they would believe his version of events, because he was the one with the badge. Something about the specificity of this audience made that formula feel unreliable. He pushed it down. He focused on the immediate problem. The woman in the alcove had an answer for every procedural challenge he presented. She was offering documentation she should not have needed to offer in the first place, and her sergeant had arrived before the situation could resolve itself. Invisibly, Hewitt had been in bad stops before. He had always gotten out of them the same way, through the union, through the grievance process, through the institutional instinct of the department to protect its own. He had 4 examples of this working perfectly. He had no reason to believe this one would be different. He did not yet know about the green lanyard in her pocket. He did not yet understand that the 4 prior examples of the system protecting him had all involved people who believed, based on a lifetime of evidence that the system would not work for them. This person did not have that belief. She believed the opposite, and that belief was about to be tested and confirmed in under 30 minutes. Calloway was still speaking quietly into the phone. His back was to Hewitt. The DOD representative, Graves, had not moved from his position near the center of the lobby, but his posture had changed. It was the posture of a man who has completed his assessment and made his determination. Colonel Okafor had taken a seat at the edge of the concierge area. He was watching everything with the composed attention of someone who has already identified all the exits and concluded that none of them are needed. Vivienne Calder stood with her wrists free and her lanyard in her hand and waited. Hewitt looked at her. He looked at the badge on the lanyard, though he could not yet read it clearly from where he stood, and felt the specific sensation of a man who has been walking forward in the dark and has just understood, by the change in the quality of the air, that there is no floor in front of him. And as Calloway pulled the key from Hewitt's fingers and stepped forward to undo the cuffs himself, Hewitt watched the duty manager and the retired colonel and the recording phones and his sergeant's expression, and he understood with a slow, cold certainty that the woman had been waiting for exactly this moment. The cuffs came off. Vivienne lowered her arms. She rolled her wrists once, checking them. She reached into her blazer pocket and removed the lanyard. She did not put it on. She held it in her left hand, face up. Calloway looked at it. He went very still. Hewitt followed his sergeant's gaze. He saw the olive green card. He saw the eagle and star emblem. He saw the rank designation below the photograph. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Calloway looked up from the card. He looked at Hewitt with the expression of a man who has just been handed a bill that is many times larger than expected. That's... Yes, Vivienne said. I need to make a phone call, she said. This time, no one told her to put her phone away. She dialed without looking at the screen. The Worthington lobby had contracted around the alcove. The guests at the edge of the space who had continued pretending to be elsewhere had stopped pretending. Patricia Reese stood close enough to hear. Okafor had taken a position slightly behind, and to Vivienne's left, not hovering, just present, the way a person stands near a colleague in a difficult room. Sergeant Calloway watched the dial. He recognized the area code. 1 ring. 2 rings. Fort McPherson, duty officer. This is Calder. Get me General Harris. Tell him it's personal. A pause, then, yes, ma'am. 1 moment. The air changed. It was not a dramatic shift. It was the specific quality of stillness that settles over a room when everyone in it simultaneously realizes that the thing they are watching is significantly larger than what it appeared to be 30 seconds ago. Calloway glanced at Hewitt. Hewitt was staring at the phone. His expression had evacuated. The chest-out posture, the squared shoulders, the small, bullying pride of a man who has spent 14 years being the most consequential person in any given interaction. All of it had left his body. What remained was the form, the uniform. Vivienne. The voice on the phone was warm, clipped, and alert in the way of men who are permanently on call. I'm at the Worthington Grand downtown, she said. I was detained by an off-duty APD officer in the hotel lobby. Handcuffed. I've been released. I'm uninjured. I have witnesses and I believe the hotel has camera footage. A brief silence. Is the officer present? Yes. His sergeant. Also present. Put me on speaker. She held the phone out into the middle of the group. Go ahead, Calloway said to Hewitt. It was not a suggestion. Hewitt leaned forward slightly, as if the phone were something, eyeing he needed to approach carefully. Officer. The voice from the phone was patient. Precise. The voice of a man who had given difficult briefings in rooms full of people whose careers depended on understanding him correctly. I want you to listen to me carefully. The woman you placed in handcuffs is Brigadier General Vivienne Calder of the United States Army. She is the Deputy Director of Military Intelligence for the Southern Command. She is in Atlanta, on my personal authorization to attend a joint defense symposium that convenes in this hotel. She has done nothing wrong. She has not broken a law, a hotel policy, or the terms of common civil courtesy. Are you following me? Hewitt's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I'm going to ask you one question, the general continued, and I want you to think before you answer, because your answer matters significantly. Did you handcuff her before or after she told you she was a federal officer? Hewitt looked at Calloway. Calloway's eyes said, do not lie to this man. Before, Hewitt said. The word was barely audible. Thank you for telling me the truth. Put Sergeant Calloway on, please. Vivienne took the phone from the center of the space and handed it to Calloway, who stepped away and began speaking in a low, measured tone with the particular posture of a man containing the velocity of a very bad day. Vivian turned to face Hewitt. He was standing where he had stood for the past 12 minutes, feet planted, hands at his sides. But the authority had drained out of the posture completely. He was a form now, a uniform holding nothing. "I gave you every chance to stop," she said. Not accusation, instruction. The tone of a person who had run this exact kind of debrief before in other rooms. "You approached me without cause. You prevented me from identifying myself and then used my inability to identify myself as justification for the restraint. You had 7 different moments where you could have verified my status through the hotel, staff alone, without involving federal channels, and you declined each of them." She looked at him without anger, without pity, with the cool specificity of a woman who had already moved to the analysis stage. "You should understand," she said, "that what happens from this point forward is not personal. It's procedural, and it will be thorough." Hewitt said nothing. Colonel Okafor appeared at her shoulder. "Conference is in 32 minutes. "I'll be there," she said. The lobby of the Worthington Grand had ceased to function as a hotel lobby. It had become a record. The guests near the restaurant entrance had not moved. 3 phones were openly recording. A man in a gray suit near the elevator bank had been on his own call for the past 8 minutes and was now watching with them, his phone still at his ear, the original conversation apparently forgotten. Marcus, the concierge, had given up all pretense of working. What happened next happened fast. 3 black SUVs pulled to the entrance. Not police cruisers, not the unmarked vehicles of a detective unit. The kind of vehicles that appear when something has failed at a level the municipal channels cannot contain. The revolving door moved. The first person through it was a woman in Army service uniform, dark green. Gold insignia, the bearing that comes from command rather than rank insignia alone. The bearing that makes ranks visible before you read. Then behind her came a man in civilian clothes with the unmistakable posture of someone who holds federal clearance as a professional condition. Behind him, half a step back, a third figure in a suit with a Department of Defense identification. Badge clipped to his lapel, the woman in uniform looked at the lobby. She found Vivienne in under 2 seconds. She was Major General Patricia Webb, 2 stars, Adjutant General's Corps, dispatched personally from Fort McPherson at General Harris's instruction. She had been briefed during the drive. She crossed the lobby flue, and stopped in front of the alcove. She looked at Calloway first. "Sergeant, where is the officer who made the detention?" Calloway turned slightly. Webb looked at Hewitt. Darren Hewitt had been standing in the alcove since Calloway had relieved him of his duty weapon and hotel credentials 20 minutes earlier, while the DOD representative, a man named Graves, conducted a preliminary interview. He had nowhere to go and no one was speaking to him. He had been watching the entrance with the expression of a man who understands, with mounting and unambiguous certainty, that each arriving vehicle represents a layer of consequence he cannot escape. When he saw the 2 stars on Webb's shoulder, what remained of the color in his face left it. "Officer Hewitt." "Yes, ma'am." Webb's voice was measured. It was not unkind, which somehow made it worse. Unkindness could be resisted, could be argued against. This tone had no angle of opposition. "I am Major General Patricia Webb. I've been dispatched in response to your detention of Brigadier General Calder. I want to confirm some facts with you directly. For the record. First, did you place General Calder in handcuffs in this lobby?" "Yes, ma'am." "At any point during the encounter, did she behave in a manner that constituted a physical threat?" Hewitt's jaw worked. He looked at Calloway said nothing. "No, ma'am." "Did she identify herself before the restraint was applied?" "She gave her name." "Did she attempt to show credentials?" "She said she was going to." "Did she show credentials?" "I told her to stop reaching into her pocket." Webb looked at him without expression. "So you prevented her from identifying herself, and then detained her for failing to identify herself." The sentence landed in the lobby air and did not move. "Ma'am, I had no way to know who she." "You prevented yourself from knowing," Webb said. "That distinction will matter in every proceeding that follows." She turned to Vivienne. Her tone shifted, not warmer exactly, but differently calibrated. "The register of a colleague, not an investigator." "Vivienne, are you all right?" "Wrists are fine," Vivienne said. "Pride is intact." The corner of Webb's mouth moved fractionally. "Your symposium starts in 28 minutes. I'll be there." Webb looked back at Graves. "Mr. Graves, the lobby is yours." Graves nodded and turned to Calloway. "Sergeant, effective immediately, Under 18 United States Code, Section 242. This is a federal civil rights matter. I need Officer Hewitt's duty weapon, his hotel security credentials, and his APD identification. No one from this department discusses this incident with media or with anyone outside the chain of command until I've spoken with your chief. Calloway turned to Hewitt. He didn't have to say anything. Hewitt unbuckled his holster. He set the gun on the concierge desk, the same desk where Vivienne had been standing 40 minutes earlier, asking whether her room key had been reset. The badge came off his shirt with a sound that was softer than he expected, almost anticlimactic for a thing he had worn every day for 14 years. He set it next to the gun. The lobby watched. Not one person sked away. The conference room on the mezzanine level was sealed by 2 o'clock, but the information moving through the corridors outside it did not require doors. By mid-afternoon, the scope of what had happened in the Worthington lobby had expanded in 3 directions at once. The first, Hewitt's complaint history. The DoD representative had requested Hewitt's APD personnel file within 40 minutes of the incident. When Graves's team reviewed it, they found 4 prior complaints: excessive force twice, unlawful detention once, racial profiling once, all cleared by the union's grievance process, standard expected. What was not standard was the secondary document that emerged during the review of Hewitt's off-duty employment file. The Atlanta Police Department maintained a log for officers working approved off-duty commercial security contracts. The Worthington had been listed as one of Hewitt's placements for 14 months. His incident logs from that placement were part of his off-duty employment record. They should have been reviewed by his supervisor. They had not been. When investigators pulled them, they found 7 entries, all in the Worthington lobby or adjacent corridors, all within the past 14 months, all involving black guests. 4 had resulted in what Hewitt had logged as voluntary compliance stops. 2 had resulted in brief detentions. In each case, the guests' hotel status had been confirmed, and they had been released. In each case, no formal police report had been filed. Hewitt had classified all 7 as informal stops, a designation that, in the APD's off-duty employment framework, required no departmental documentation. Voluntary compliance. The phrase had no legal standing. It was a personal classification system that had allowed Hewitt to run a profiling operation in the lobby of a luxury hotel for over a year without generating a single piece of formal paper. None of the 7 guests knew their encounters had been logged. None of them had been a brigadier general. All of them had received the same treatment. When Graves walked Calloway through the logs at 3:15 that afternoon, Calloway sat for a long time without speaking. Why wasn't anyone reviewing these? Graves asked. Calloway did not have an answer, which was, in its own way, an answer. The DOJ Civil Rights Division was formally notified that afternoon. By 5 o'clock, what had begun as a single incident in one hotel lobby had become a documented pattern under federal review. The off-duty employment contract program, which placed APD officers in 12 commercial properties across the metro area, was suspended pending audit. Calloway made 9 calls. His chief made 4 more. Gerald Holt, the property manager who had renewed Hewitt's contract 3 years running without reviewing his complaint history, was placed on administrative leave by the hotel group that evening. Hewitt was informed of the scope of the investigation by his attorney, who called him at 7:42 that night. Hewitt had no response. He sat in his car in a parking structure near his apartment for 20 minutes after the call ended, engine running, going nowhere. The Atlanta Police Department's formal response began within hours, because it had to. The moment the Department of Justice opened a civil rights inquiry, the APD's Internal Affairs Division was legally obligated to initiate a parallel investigation. Chief Reuben Oswald, who had spent the better part of 2 years working to rebuild the department's public standing after a string of unrelated controversies, was reached by phone at 6:15 that evening while attending a school event. He left early. His first call was to the city attorney. His second was to the mayor's office. His third was to Calloway. "Tell me how bad it is," Oswald said. "It's 14 months in a single property," Calloway said. 7 documented incidents. All the same demographic, no formal reports filed for any of them. Oswald was quiet. Who was supervising his off-duty contract? The Off-Duty Employment Office approved the placement. There's no assigned supervisor for individual incident logs at commercial properties. Nobody was reviewing them. Another silence. Nobody was supposed to. There's no written protocol that requires a supervisor to review off-duty security logs. unless a formal incident report is filed, which he never filed. Correct. So he built a compliance gap into his own system, Oswald said. That's one interpretation. What's another? Calloway said nothing. The city attorney's response came in two phases. The first was containment, a statement issued within 12 hours acknowledging the incident, noting that an internal investigation was underway and, in fact, emphasizing the department's commitment to accountability. The statement did not mention the 7 prior incidents because, at the time it was drafted, the legal team had not yet been fully briefed on the shift logs. By the time the second phase began, 3 days later, when the full scope of the pattern charge had been communicated by the DOJ, the tone of the city attorney's office had changed significantly. The Worthington Grand's parent company issued a separate statement. They expressed profound regret and announced an immediate review of all security contractor relationships at their domestic hotel locations. The 6 prior guests, the ones documented in Hewitt's shift logs, began to receive calls from the DOJ Victim Services Coordinator on the 4th day. Each of them was surprised to receive the call. Several said in their statements that they had not reported their individual experiences at the time because they had not believed anything would come of it. One said she had mentioned it to a friend and let it go. One said he had considered calling the hotel management but had decided it was not worth the effort. One said she had just wanted to leave. The nurse who had been there for a medical conference said she had spent the evening in her room trying to figure out what she had done wrong. She had done nothing wrong. She had been standing in a hotel lobby. When Calloway was shown her statement during his IA interview, he read it twice and then sat without speaking for a long moment before confirming, quietly, that 7 incidents had occurred without review. The silence in that interview room had the particular quality of silence that follows when a preventable thing is named. Precisely, and there is nothing left to say except that it was preventable. By the following morning, Hewitt had been officially suspended without pay, pending both the internal affairs investigation and the federal inquiry. The off-duty contract program had been suspended. Across all 12 properties, the shift logs from all 12 locations had been preserved as potential evidence. On day 3, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division formally joined the case. The anchoring charge was 18 United States Code Section 242, minus deprivation of rights under color of law. Because the DOJ had documented 7 prior incidents forming a clear behavioral pattern, the charge was applied not as a single offense but as a pattern charge. The distinction carried significantly heavier penalties and made the defense's task considerably harder. Hewitt's attorney filed a motion arguing that the prior incidents lacked the specific intent required by the federal statute. The DOJ responded by presenting the shift logs, the demographic consistency across all 7 incidents, and Hewitt's own informal classification system as evidence of deliberate and sustained pattern behavior. The motion was denied. The police union declined to represent him in federal proceedings. Their statements cited conduct inconsistent with the standards of the collective bargaining agreement, a clause that had been inserted 2 years earlier precisely to create a carve-out for federal civil rights violations. Hewitt received this news in a voicemail from his own union representative. The rep did not return subsequent calls. The United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia convened 6 months later. The courtroom was full. Darren Hewitt arrived in a dark suit. It fit him less well than it had when he bought it. He had lost weight in the months between the arrest and the trial. He looked smaller than the man who had squared his chest in the Worthington lobby, and the comparison was visible to everyone who had seen the hotel footage, which included most of the people in the room, because the hotel footage had been entered into evidence as Exhibit A, and the prosecution played it in full during opening arguments. Osa Margaret Olcott let it run without narration. The lobby T. He handcuffs the alcove. The 11-minute sequence in which Vivienne Calder had offered, systematically and without raising her voice, every form of identification available to her and been refused each time. The arrival of the SUVs, Calloway's face when he looked at the lanyard. Hewitt's hand setting the badge on the concierge desk. When it ended, Olcott said, "You watched a police officer handcuff a decorated Army general in a hotel lobby for standing at a desk. We are going to spend the next several days in this room explaining how that happened 7 times before anyone, with authority, was in the room to stop it." The jury was composed of 9 women and 3 men. They ranged in age from 24 to 68. They came from 5 different Atlanta zip codes. They had the particular attentiveness of people who have decided to take something seriously. The prosecution called 11 witnesses. 3 were hotel staff: Marcus, the concierge, Patricia Reese, and a guest whose phone footage had captured the entire exchange from an angle that confirmed the timeline and captured the audio. 2 were FBI investigators who had analyzed the shift logs. 1 was a digital forensics specialist who walked through the camera footage frame by frame with timestamps. And 1 was Vivienne Calder. She entered the courtroom in uniform. Brigadier General. The gallery went still in the way that rooms go still when someone with genuine authority enters. Not silence, exactly, but a lowering of ambient sound, a collective realignment of attention. She sat in the witness stand with her hands folded and answered every question with the same measured precision she had used in the lobby. When Olcott asked her to describe the moment the handcuffs were applied, Vivienne said, "He placed me in restraints before I had completed a full sentence. I had given my name and was beginning my room number. He told me to stop reaching for my identification. He then used my inability to produce identification, which he had prevented, as justification for the detention." Olcott said, "In your assessment, why did Officer Hewitt approach you?" "Because of what I looked like," she said. "What did you look like?" "A black woman in a hotel lobby." The juror in the second row on the left side wrote something down and underlined it. The cross-examination of Hewitt lasted most of a morning. He took the stand in his own defense at the insistence of his attorney, who believed that Hewitt's forthright manner would be his best asset with the jury. It was not. Asa Olcott took him through the shift logs entry by entry, asking him to read each one aloud in his own words. She asked him to explain the voluntary compliance classification system. She asked him to describe, in specific terms, what observable behavior had prompted each stop. He gave answers that were individually defensible. She had expected this. She did not argue with the individual answers. She waited until all 7 entries had been read. Then she asked, "Officer Hewitt, what is the racial composition of these 7 individuals?" He said, "I don't recall focusing on—" "I'm not asking what you focused on," she said. "The logs include a physical description of each subject. Read us the racial designations from your own logs." His attorney objected. The objection was overruled. Hewitt read them, 7 for 7. "Of the hotel guests you did not log, the ones you passed each day during your 14 months at the Worthington, the ones you never stopped. What was their racial composition?" "I can't say." "You can't say because you didn't document them. Correct?" "Correct. So what we have," Olcott said, picking up the shift log and holding it up so the jury could see it, "is a 14-month record of informal stops, all of them involving black guests, none of them involving any other demographic, none of them generating formal documentation. This is the complete paper record of your enforcement activity at the Worthington Grand." She set it down. 7 stops, 7 black guests, 0 formal findings, 0 formal reports, 0 supervisor review. She looked at him for a long moment. "What would I need to conclude that this was something other than deliberate targeting?" His attorney objected again. She withdrew the question. She didn't need the answer. The jury already had it. The defense's closing argument lasted 40 minutes. It was technically competent. It raised every available procedural question about the sufficiency of the evidence, the standard of proof, the ambiguity of the pattern charge. It invoked good faith 7 times. Olcott's closing lasted 22 minutes. She played 35 seconds of the hotel camera footage, the moment the first cuff clicked shut. "Good faith," she said, "does not look like that." She sat down. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 19 minutes. They returned on a Thursday at 4 in the afternoon. They did not look at Hewitt. Guilty, on all counts. Judge Adrienne Cole looked at Hewitt across the courtroom before she spoke. "Mr. Hewitt, you were given a badge by the people of this city as a symbol of their trust. You used it as a personal license to determine who belonged and who didn't in spaces that belonged equally to every person who walked into them. You were systematic. You were careful. You were protected by an oversight gap that you appear to have understood and exploited. And when a circumstance finally occurred in which your target had the institutional resources hold you accountable, you did not stop. You escalated." She set her papers down. "On the federal charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, pattern offense, I sentence you to 72 months in federal custody. You are permanently decertified as a law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia. You are barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity in any jurisdiction. You are further ordered to pay restitution to each of the 7 documented prior victims in the amount of $40,000 per person. The gavel came down. 2 sharp strikes. Hewitt sat very still. Then the marshals came, and the handcuffs went on. The same sound. The same 2 metallic clicks. Different direction entirely. 3 weeks after the verdict, Vivian Calder was at her desk at Fort McPherson at 7 in the morning. Coffee on the left. Briefing folder on the right. The intelligence cycle did not pause for personal disruption, and she had not asked it to. This was not compartmentalization. It was simply how she had always worked, forward. General Harris knocked on the open door. He sat down across from her without waiting to be invited, which was the kind of thing that only people who genuinely respected each other could do without it being impolite. "How are you doing?" he asked. She considered the question the way she considered most things, honestly and without performance. "Better than I expected to be. I'm still angry, but it's less than it was. It's becoming something else." "What is it becoming?" She thought about it. Purpose, maybe. Harris nodded slowly. "It shouldn't have required what it required," she said. "Not a complaint. A plain statement of structural fact. 7 people before me received the same treatment. None of them had the resources to compel a federal response. They accepted it as a cost of existing in that space because they believed, based on experience, that nothing would change if they reported it. Until circumstance," she said. "I happen to be there. I happen to be who I am. That's not a system, that's luck." Harris was quiet. All 6 of them contacted the DOJ after the verdict. "I know." She had read each of their statements. One of them was a nurse attending a medical conference. She said she spent 2 hours in her room afterward trying to figure out what she had done wrong. Vivian paused. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a black woman in a lobby. "No," Harris said. Outside the window, Fort McPherson moved through its morning. Formations forming, vehicles rolling, the ordinary machinery of service that she had been part of for 22 years. "Patricia Webb wants to have lunch when you're in Washington next week," Harris said. "Tell her I'll be there." He stood to leave at the doorway. He stopped. "You handled every step of that correctly," he said. "I want you to know that I know that." She looked back at her briefing folder. "I know," she said. She said it without pride and without apology. The way you say a thing that has simply always been true and does not require external confirmation to remain so. He left. She read the briefing. Darren Hewitt walked into the Worthington Grand lobby, convinced that a badge gave him the right to decide who belonged in a space that did not belong to him. He saw Vivian Calder and ran his private checklist and reached his verdict before he asked a single question. What he could not see, because the checklist he had built left no room for it, was that he had chosen a woman who had spent 22 years as an Army intelligence officer, a woman who had briefed in active conflict zones, advised general officers, and operated in environments where a single misjudgment could cost lives, a woman who was, by every objective measure, more disciplined, more prepared, and more formidable in a courtroom than Darren Hewitt would ever be in any room he walked into. He gave her his worst. She made one phone call, and that one phone call started a chain of events that exposed 14 months of systematic targeting, dismantled his career, stripped his credentials, sent him to federal prison, and opened a DOJ review that eventually led to restitution for every person he had profiled and released without consequence, because they hadn't had a general officer's direct line in their contacts. The lesson is not complicated. True authority does not need to announce itself in a hotel lobby. True power does not need to prove itself to a man who mistakes a badge for a guarantee of deference. And the moment you use a position of public trust as a weapon against the people it was meant to protect, you do not just make a mistake, you build a record. And records eventually find the people who need to read them. If this story hit you the way it was meant to, drop a like right now. Share this with someone who needs to see what discipline and composure look like when they walk back out of a lobby with the full weight of institutional justice behind them. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. Justice keeps arriving right on time.